Take a look at this next video, which is also used with permission. The vagus nerve is one we just did a little reset on, and it's fascinating stuff. But there is a direct connection between the brain and the gut. And we used to think that it was only a one-way thing where, if people got anxious, they get stomach issues. And you see it a lot in children, right? If they get fearful about school or, something's happened to them, they'll get a tummy ache. And what we're finding later on is that the brain and the gut are talking to each other all the time, and what's going on in the gut can actually make you feel poorly. And one of the things that really improves gut health, when we talk about gut health, what we're talking about is the introduction of probiotics into your gastric system. And probiotics come from pickled things like sauerkraut and kimchi and that kind of stuff. Increases the wellness in your stomach. It's marvelous. I take a product called Kefir, K-E-F-I-R. It has lots of that stuff. It's like a sort of a loose yogurt. You can get it in different flavors. It's really, really good for your insides. And one of the things that's interesting is that alcohol kills it. So people are, dosing to effect with alcohol to try to feel a little bit better. Gets in the way of feeling better because the probiotic levels in your stomach is down. So please take a look at this video on the brain-gut relationship and also the vagus nerve stuff. I think you find it really useful.
Live a better life by hacking your vagus nerve. In this video, I'll be explaining why this little nerve is not only key to your well-being, but has a pivotal role in your decision-making. But before I get there, let's go back and do just a little bit of biology. Because for any hack, you need to understand how things work first. So it's geek alert time, because we need to talk about your autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is an integral part of the human body, as it monitors and regulates the visceral organs: heart, lungs, liver, gallbladder, stomach, intestines, kidneys, and sex organs. Problems with any of these organs can arise from the dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system. It is also the part of our bodies that deals with stress. Whatever the stress is that we experience, not sleeping enough, poor diet, or toxic relationships, that stress is translated into hormones that directly affect the function of our organs. You've probably heard of the fight or flight mode. Well, this is a great state for escaping from predators, but it's not a healthy state to be in for more than a few minutes. Research has even shown that our IQ is reduced, and we are less creative when we're in this fight or flight mode. So when we're in this stress mode, our thoughts focus on getting away from things that we don't like. Stress clients talk to me about what they don't want, like changing jobs, moving house, or avoiding people. These are all stress responses, and stress is not a good place to come from when making important life and career decisions. When it comes to coaching people, I want them to be in what's called the rest and recover mode, where your body is relaxed and the creative parts of your brain are fully engaged. If you want to learn more about how the brain operates under stress, then have a look at the video in the description. A key part of this rest and recover mode is controlled by the vagus nerve. This nerve is the longest nerve in the body, which originates in the brain and travels down the neck and then connects to the digestive system: liver, spleen, pancreas, heart, and lungs. It has a special role in reducing inflammation, lowering blood pressure, and balancing the hormones in our bodies, so that we recover from stress quickly and feel happy and relaxed, ready for the next challenge. Now, the vagus nerve in babies is a finely tuned instrument. It's how they can go from crying 1 minute to laughing and being blissfully happy the next. It's why babies sleep well, like babies. But modern living isn't kind to the vagus, and for many of us, our vagus has lost its luster. This can actually be measured using what's called heart rate variability, and you can learn more about this with the link in the description. The health of your vagus is commonly called vagal tone. High vagal tone improves the function of many body systems, causing better blood sugar regulation, reduced risk of stroke and cardiovascular disease, lower blood pressure, and improved digestion. Higher vagal tone is also associated with better mood, less anxiety, and more stress resilience. So essentially, a healthy vagus is key to being happy, resilient, and making good decisions. So how do we get our vagus back to its original baby state? Here's 3 things that research has shown that make a big difference. Number 1, cold water. Temperature therapy is huge in professional sports right now, whether it's ice baths or cryotherapy chambers, because they seem to rev up recovery by improving vagal tone. Some of you might want to ease into it with a cold shower occasionally, but actually you can get a lot of the same benefit just by splashing cold water on your face in the morning and before bed. This activates a primal reflex called the mammalian dive reflex that is designed to slow our bodies down when diving into water. It's simple and can have a dramatic effect on your vagus if done regularly. Number 2, using your voice. Ever seen yogis chanting Om on TV? Well, there's some science behind this, as your vagus runs past your vocal cords and through your lungs. And research shows that not just chanting, but singing, laughing, and even gargling activate the vagus nerve and slow you down. So try singing along to your favourite tunes on your way to work, or gargle mouthwash first thing in the morning and see what it does to you. And finally, number 3, breathing. Of course, we breathe all the time, but our breathing patterns reflect our vagal tone. I can tell a lot about a client's vagal tone by the speed and shallowness of their breath. Learning to breathe slower and deeper can take some time and practice, and for this I recommend the HeartMath Inner Balance, which feeds back to you how your breathing is affecting your heart rate variability. Alternatively, there's a free breathing pacer link in the description, which you can follow on your phone. Do it for a few minutes and you'll feel your vagus nerve coming on. So there you go, a quick primer on the importance of the vagus nerve and some of the rapid strategies you can use to improve it. The vagus nerve is a key part of my coaching, and it's not just about health, but in helping you make better decisions in your life and career. If you have any questions on the vagus nerve, please leave a comment, and for more videos on building your resilience and improving your performance, please subscribe.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about stress responses and how your body and your brain respond to things. Some of this will certainly be a review for you. If you have any background or history in CISM or critical incident stress, this is the foundational piece for most peer support systems. Actually, you know, when in the 80s when I started working on this, there wasn't anything but a CISM system, and it works great for what it's for, but it doesn't really work on the chronic, and the chronic is where I find that's where the money is in peer support. So the first thing we notice with changes to people who are experiencing trauma or are exposed to trauma or having a physiological response is they get changes in their body, physical changes. Physical changes are good because they tend to notice that, can be aware of it in a way that if you ask them, you know, what changes have you noticed, they may be able to tell you something. And then we also have emotional changes, which is sort of a relative sense of normalcy in their point of view. We are affected by what we see, and oftentimes that changes our emotional position. And then the other thing is what we call cognitive, or the processing part. And cognitive responses can be anything from you know, forgetting stuff and losing stuff to losing control of your vocabulary and not being able to find the right word for things. That's all part of what we're experiencing when we're having a CISM or critical incident stress event. When we talk about physical changes, the things that we mostly see are like shakes or some kind of trembling. We'll get occasionally itching, but for sure you're going to see an increase in heart rate. You're going to see blood pressure go up. Those are all hyperarousal symptoms. You see that a lot. And left untreated, those kind of things turn into things like ulcers, hair loss, chronic rashes, and that sort of stuff. You see that a lot with people who have a constant amount of stress. The most common that we find, especially if it's trauma-based stress, is gastric issues, and this is really kind of interesting because people recognize what's going on with their insides, and depending on what sort of exposure you have, you can have two responses. You can have people can become nauseous, and I've seen people become hungry. You can have people become having explosive diarrhea, and then people having their guts all bound up. And it seems to depend on the type of trauma that we're seeing or what we're exposed to. So the idea that the gastric system is going to shut down when the body's under threat, that makes a fair bit of sense when you think about it. And to void the body when it's fighting for its life is also something to think about. So I'll give you two really good examples on this. Is that in the pre-antibiotic era of the First World War, one of the reasons that there was so much death in the trenches and so much infection was soldiers were exposed to E. coli, to human waste. And the reason for that is that you actually can be scared shitless. It's an actual thing. So in addition to all the mud and, you know, waste products from animals, and they were into their own human waste in that space. So the sickness level was unbelievably high. It's a real thing. I'll give you a really good example of another gastric issue. Was one of my peers, another command chief, had a major industrial commercial fire where the building actually filled with smoke and detonated and blew the side off the building and landed on one of his crews outside of the building and right where he was. And you know, the tons of rock and rubble and steel and stuff that fell on him, and then the fireball came out behind it, and he watched what he thought was watching 4 of his guys die, and managed to get that scene under control and, you know, peel back the rubble, and the medics had to expose themselves to smoke and stuff. And 2 of the guys were very badly injured with blast and crush injuries, and one of them was VSA. And they peeled off his gear and got him restarted, got him his heart started again, and scooped him up and got him to the hospital. And, you know, those guys are still alive to this day. But so when I talked to this fella, and I, you know, was doing some peer work with him at the time, this event happened on a Tuesday. And I saw him Friday afternoon. So what's going on with you? You know, what do you notice? Any changes or any response to how that call went for you? And he admitted that he had gone off on a girl in the underground parking checkout little kiosk deal. He'd given her shit for something, and that's just not his way. And he was embarrassed by having done that. And then he also admitted that he hadn't had a bowel movement since Tuesday, and now it's Friday. So you get both sides of that. Yes, fear can scare the shit out of you, but shock can cause your system to shut down and completely stop working. Fascinating stuff. The really good part about it is people are aware of this, and they recognize the change, and they don't always notice the emotional or spiritual changes, but they will notice the physical. So as far as the emotional change piece, you know, we don't necessarily see it, as I said, and we kind of get an overwhelming sort of sense of some blues and some sadness. You start to see some self-blame sometimes when there's an expectation that more could have been done. Those expectations are oftentimes baseless, but they're part of what we have to experience. And what I find when we see changes in people, and one of the best indicators for someone who's struggling that you can see, you know, this being the clinical, is people's sense of humor being affected to the point where they're either laughing at stuff that's not funny, or they don't laugh when we think, you know, culturally appropriately we should laugh. And then sometimes their humor can become really dark and you know, sexist or racist and that kind of stuff. That's a really good indicator of somebody who's having some issues. So have an eye for that. That's one of the little sneaky things that I do to see what's going on with people, is see where they are in terms of their sense of humor. The irritability and anger piece, that's, as we say, those tend to be depressive. It's also an indicator of a hyperarousal. That's a fight piece. In terms of you know, how we're responding to what we're doing. And the thing we mostly find on the emotional piece is sort of a numbing sadness, and those people are very much inclined to isolate. If they're isolators who you know to be substance users, you kind of have to keep an eye on those folks. They might not tell you a lot, but you kind of have to watch them. So, and then in terms of cognitive changes, your clients may not be fully aware of this, but it's a real thing. And we see changes in perception and memory. Gaps in memories tend to fill out. One of the reasons that eyewitness testimony can be so unreliable is that if your brain's really surprised by something it's looking at, it can fill in gaps with basically with fiction. So we've got to really kind of keep an eye on that part of it. But you know, in terms of the peer part, we can see people making poor decisions, forgetting their keys, not knowing what room they're in or why, and that kind of fog that comes from being overwhelmed. You sometimes see that in cognitive issues, but attached to that is some sensory stuff. People may not hallucinate, but not see things correctly, have their vision dimmed. One of the really interesting things that I've experienced is an auditory exclusion. And you'll see this also in the work of Dr. Grossman, who I mentioned earlier, that when in officer-involved shootings, officers commonly state that they thought their service weapon wasn't working properly because it was just making a popping noise and sparks were coming out, but everybody else's gun seems to be working fine. And that's a very common experience under high stress, because the brain sees what's happening and sort of shuts off your hearing inputs so that your ears are protected. And they actually do protect your ears a little bit. It's also something that people who hunt will say, that when they squeeze off around, it's not as noisy as the guy beside them. So that's a really interesting thing, and I'll give you a story about that. Was a couple of my crews responded to a very minor MVC at a train track, and there was 2 tow trucks there, and they were just wrapping it up. It was almost over with. They were just providing a little care to the one person in one of the cars, and one of the tow truck guys said to his partner, "Hey, you got to move your rig off the tracks. When that wigwag thing goes up, it's going to hit your truck." So the second guy jumped into his truck and backed it across the train tracks and into the path of a GO train, a very large green and white, you see them in Ontario, passenger commuter train that was going at passenger commuter train speed. And it struck him on the door and instantly killed him, of course, and drag him down the road for a long, long way. And the crews that were on the scene had very different experiences. Is that the crews that were still working on the one patient in the car said it was the loudest crash they had ever heard. And the crews who were outside and watched it happen said it just sort of sounded like a pumpkin falling off a balcony or something. So that's called an auditory exclusion. It's something that as you get talking to people, they may reveal to you, and it might be of some concern to them because they think that there's something weird going on, that they know they should have heard something. It's actually the brain working properly, but it can give a sense that things aren't right. When we talk about the cognitive, the part of this that's the most interesting or most prevalent as a peer support person is people will sometimes report that they're having flashbacks. Flashbacks are terms that a term that means different things to different people, but for the purposes here, what we're seeing is we're seeing an intrusive imagery that's recent. And what it is they will see the piece of the film that they're in and watch something unfold over and over and over again. It's like a black and white film that just rolls in their head, and it'll keep playing. It really causes for concern because when they're experiencing it, your folks are going to feel like they're completely losing their mind. And the next step from losing their mind is, if I can't do this job, I can't look after my family, I don't have skills to transfer, I can't be a firefighter or a cop anymore. And it just uses this strings of cognitive distortions that follow. So the really interesting thing about that intrusive piece of imagery is it really is just your brain's way of processing something that surprised it. It's going to watch that movie over and over and over and over again, and then it's going to go, "Oh yeah, we were at a thing, we did this, that was the outcome, it's all good." And then the movies will stop, and they'll stop within a day or two. But one of the things that you can do when you're doing your inoculation, one of the things that you can do, not just when you go out to see crews and explain to them what they should be expecting, but this is very much the kind of thing that when you're bringing in new members to your organization, and your peer team should be doing this as you get a little better at this, have the new hires and their families come in before they hit the floor or hit the job, and explain to them some of the things that they're going to experience, and have their partners aware of, here's some stuff they may be reporting, and you can just support them by letting them know that, yeah, remember they said that was something that could happen. It takes a ton of pressure off and makes them feel a whole lot better. So we encourage people to let the intrusive imageries play, because they're going to anyway, and after a while they just kind of stop. Be aware of that. It's the most unsettling part of this experience for people, and it's actually one of the ways that your mind's acting in a very, very